Do we count Dante Moore as a transfer starting at quarterback? Like he was committed to the Ducks, went to UCLA, transferred back, sat for a year. At the very least, it's not a plug and play transfer who you brought in. It's someone who was on the roster the previous season, sitting and waiting his turn. So it's kind of that weird gray area. But beyond 2025 for Oregon at the quarterback room, what do you think that looks like? Drop your predictions below or hit me up on Twitter. I bet you all have a wide variety of predictions on that front because Dante Moore is going into his third season of college football. And this is a guy who, even when he was coming out of high school, when I talked to him in Las Vegas, he was very open about the fact that, yeah, one of my goals is I want to get to the NFL and be a starting quarterback. He believes he can do that. Would you be able to get where you want to go in the NFL draft after 1 year of starting? Maybe. We've seen guys do it before. Mitch Trubisky started, 15 games at North Carolina? I know it didn't work out, but he got drafted, had the opportunity there. So Dante Moore started a handful of games at UCLA and, of course, started no games for Oregon last year because the offensive line kept Dylan Gabriel upright, and he's, just kind of a well-built, he's not a big guy, but he's a sturdy enough guy, and so too is Dante Moore, and fingers crossed he stays healthy the entire year. I'll get to Austin Novosad more in just a moment, but what if Dante Moore, what if I am wrong about Dante Moore and he deserves not just to be a preseason top 10 Heisman favorite, but to be top 2 or 3, and he gets himself in the running and he throws for over 4,000 yards and 38 touchdowns and 5 interceptions and runs a little bit as well, but he's just looking pinpoint accurate, second coming of Drew Brees. What if he does all of that? Maybe he declares for the NFL draft. Suddenly Oregon is back to, okay, we need a starting quarterback for 2026. So if that happens, well, that would be great for Oregon's 2025 prospects and outperforming my preseason expectations. But for Oregon, kind of makes things a little bit complicated at the quarterback spot. On the other side of the coin, he could be Oregon's starting quarterback for the next 3 seasons because he utilized the red shirt this past season. I'm pretty sure he fell inside those guidelines, and so he would start this year. He burned a red shirt opportunity, of course, at UCLA because he was the starter at one point in time. But he could be a 3-year starting quarterback. He could be a 2-year starting quarterback, which is why you always want to have options. It's why Oregon's going after both guys in Ryder Lyons and Jared Curtis in the class of 2026. You just want to have choices. It's why they were willing to have Once Upon a Time, even though I had an inclination that JKS wasn't going to stick with the Ducks long term because it's never where he wanted to end up. Was Oregon, of course, willing to accept him? Why were they going after him, even though they already had Akili Smith Jr.? Because you always want to have options. So Oregon's quarterback room is unique under Dan Lanning going into this year in that it's not a guy who is a proven starter in college football. There is a question mark there, and it's one of several I have for this team going into the fall. But, gosh, would that be the biggest question? I don't know. Maybe I'll explore that on another episode of the show. But if Dante Moore winds up having this great season, maybe Oregon has to convince him to come back with a hefty NIL package. But then what would that mean for Austin Novosad? And in the short term, what do you do with Austin Novosad if you're Oregon? You'd love to develop and have him available to be a starting caliber quarterback going into 2026 if Dante Moore winds up being a one and done. But I imagine he's not going to sit around forever. So Novosad is someone who we saw in the spring game last year was the biggest standout from that event. By far. It was the biggest takeaway I had from the spring game. Holy smokes. Dante Moore looks exactly like I expect him to, but man, that Novosad kid can sling it, and he is accurate, and he looks like he's got a big arm. Made one bad decision, but that was really it. Everything else, he was phenomenally good. So if you're able to have both these guys who came out in the same recruiting class, 2023, and both have utilized a red shirt and are now going into their third season of college football, there are plenty of similarities there. But would he be willing to wait for that opportunity? If they go through, look, the outside standpoint for Oregon's quarterback situation going into 2025 is going to be Dante Moore, right? There's a picture that shows up on Instagram of him talking to the team, and Trayshawn Holden and Tez Johnson and all these guys are gassing him up on their way out the door off to the NFL draft. So that's the perception, but is that always reflective of what's going on in the room? Is there a 0% chance that Novosad beats him out? I don't think it's 0. I think it's probably 5 or less. But it might not be 0. He could have the opportunity. But if you're Austin Novosad and you want to start one day, this is obviously among the most quarterback-friendly offenses that you could possibly start in. Back-to-back Heisman Trophy finalists at quarterback. Nobody else has that. Nobody in the country has produced back-to-back Heisman Trophy finalists at the quarterback position. But Will Stein has done it. So I just wonder what his thought process is. Is he comfortable being the backup this year? And that Dante Moore will be one and done and it'll be his turn? And then he'll get to be the guy ahead of Akili Smith Jr. and we'll keep the ball rolling? Or does he know, maybe I'm not going to be a starter? I don't know. I'm fascinated to see how that plays out. If you told me right now Austin Novosad hits the spring transfer portal window, I wouldn't be totally shocked. Just because the path to playing time, remember, Luke Moga's in that room as well, and Akili Smith Jr. is in there now as well. I wouldn't be shocked if he seeks greener pastures, but maybe he waits to see how this season plays out. Because Dante Moore's also a guy that got benched at UCLA because he kept throwing interceptions. Well, if that happens again, and Oregon has to make a change, Novosad would be the most likely guy going into his 3rd season. So maybe that's an opportunity he's willing to wait for. Maybe it isn't. But that could absolutely be coming into play if Dante Moore has not rectified the issues that he had as a true freshman at UCLA. I like his chances. I certainly like his chances to be able to do that. But let me know below. How many years do you think Dante Moore starts as Oregon's quarterback? 1, 2, or 3? All are options. This all stemmed from a question I got from a Locked On Ducks insider, where you get priority mailbag access and a bunch of other perks as well. Link in the description below. You can get a free 14-day trial. Question. Hey, Spencer, fun question for you. You mentioned on the pod you could see Dan Lanning winning a championship with Oregon in the next 5 years, a national championship, because, of course, he just won a Big Ten championship. Say that prediction comes to fruition. Fingers crossed. Who do you see being the quarterback that wins the Natty for us? That's an incredibly difficult question to answer. I think Oregon's team in 2026 is going to be awesome. And I could see that being Dante Moore. I think it is more likely Akili Smith Jr. is the quarterback that wins Oregon a national championship, which would be beautifully poetic, than Austin Novosad. Just because of the timelines and the path to playing time. Right now, as a 2025 kid, I'd say it's most likely Akili is starting by 2027. And if it's his first year, then I'd say it's really hard to start in your first year and be at that sort of level, but less difficult when you sat for a couple of years, right? Mariota sat for a year, and in 2012, that team was good enough to win it all. They just had to stumble at home against Stanford. So that I think would be more likely, and I think as a passer, Smith and Novosad are way ahead of where Luke Moga is. That's somewhat of a wild card in this whole quarterback discussion, but overall, I'd say Dante Moore or Akili Smith Jr. in the next 5 years. You're talking 2025, 26, 27, 28, or 29. In one of those 5 seasons, the way that Oregon's recruited the last couple cycles and when those players should be rounding into the best versions of themselves, 26 is going to be a great chance. I think 27 could be as well. I think they will both be better opportunities than what Oregon will have in 25, but I think they'll still be in that position this fall because the schedule's really favorable and they still have plenty of talent across the board. So drop your predictions below. How many years does Dante Moore start, and who's the quarterback that leads Oregon to its first national championship?